April, I'm wondering what your takeaway is from this report. It's obviously been long anticipated. Is it about what we had expected? Is it worse? Is it better? And what does this mean for Gates' potential political future, if he even has one?
It's worse because it's real. When you think it versus when you know it, that's the whole piece. Now we know it. For those who support transparency in government, this is a win for them, but it's definitely not a win for Matt Gaetz, who Donald Trump did not vet for the office of to be in a cabinet position, to be the head of the Department of Justice. I mean, you have someone who has a report from his colleagues in Congress showing what he did, and this is the man that could have been the head of the Justice Department. This is scathing for Matt Gaetz.
Stephanie, I want to ask you, since you and Gaetz overlapped a bit in Congress, it seems he didn't have a lot of friends there, even on his side of the aisle. Are you surprised this report was released, and what are you expecting the reaction to be?
Members of Congress to the highest standards of conduct. And unlike other committees, this committee is one that is evenly split between Democrats and Republicans. And so the fact that this committee voted to make the report public means that there were Republicans who voted with Democrats to issue this report. So this was quite a bipartisan effort to ensure that there was some transparency. And I think, you know, the American people would deserve to know that no one in elected office is above the law or beyond accountability.
Charlie, you know, you're a Republican. You used to chair the Ethics Committee. I'm looking at it now. This is a heck of an investigation. It says the committee authorized 29 subpoenas for documents and testimony, reviewed nearly 14,000 documents, and collected more than 24 witnesses. What is your read of this situation and why the committee decided to release this report even after Gaetz resigned from Congress?
Well, first, let me say the Ethics Committee staff is nonpartisan. They're very professional. I'm not surprised by the figures you just quoted. They released this because there has been precedent for releasing reports after members of Congress have resigned, particularly in matters of sexual misconduct, which is obviously the case here. There was a case in, I think it was in 1990, Lukens of Ohio. He had allegedly sex with a 16-year-old. A report was released after he resigned from Congress. I believe that was the seat John Boehner then was elected to shortly thereafter. So there's also Mark Foley. The committee took actions after, he had sent inappropriate text messages to House pages. And there have been other issues. So I'm not surprised that they released this report, and particularly because he was being considered to become the top law enforcement official of the United States. And as I read this report, and it seemed that at least one, I haven't read the report yet, but I read an analysis by one news outlet that seemed to have had the report prior to its release. This is really damning. What I was really wanting to know was the committee going to recommend an expulsion because, there's sex, drugs, money. The committee is saying that supposedly that Gaetz may have violated Florida state law. So I'm wondering if the committee actually referred this matter to the Florida Attorney General for further review, which they can do. So there's a lot here. Matt Gaetz has suggested or implied that he might be sworn in January. I don't think that's going to happen now because should he get sworn in, I suspect it would be an immediate motion to expel him.
In addition to some of those top line allegations we've been discussing, I'm looking at the count here, and it says in some the committee found substantial evidence of the following, and among that it also talks about Representative Gaetz accepted gifts, including transportation and lodging in connection with a 2018 trip to the Bahamas in excess of permissible amounts. We want to go now to NBC News correspondent Ryan Nobles, who's been waiting for this all morning. All right, Ryan, now that it's out, what are we learning and what are the big takeaways?
Well, Christina, I think the most damning accusation by the House Ethics Committee is that they believe that they found substantial evidence that Matt Gaetz is guilty of statutory rape, that he engaged in sexual activity with a 17-year-old girl who at the time testified before the committee that she had just finished her junior year of high school. This was during a party in 2017 where this girl testified to the committee. She's now a woman, but testified to the committee at the time that she and Gaetz had sex on 2 different occasions at this party. They also had that testimony backed up by the testimony of other witnesses who were at this party at the same time. In fact, one of the engagements between this then girl and Gates happened in public view where other people could see it. And so this, they believe, is in violation of Florida law in particular, and they believe that Florida authorities should investigate this even further to determine whether or not he is indeed guilty of statutory rape. The other kind of lengthy bit of evidence that the committee has collected over time is this pattern of what they would accuse Matt Gaetz of paying for sex. They list some $90,000 in transactions among 12 different women, which they use messaging apps and cash apps, Venmo, things along those lines, to connect the dots between Gaetz' sexual activity and these women. And then also the testimony from the women where they claimed that they believed that the activity that they were engaged in was the result of these payments from Gaetz. In particular, there was a 2018 trip to the Bahamas where Gaetz and 4 different women went to the Bahamas. He engaged in sex with all these women. One of the women testified to the committee that she believed the trip to the Bahamas was payment for the sex that she was providing. Another witness, one of the women, said that they saw Gaetz taking ecstasy on that trip. This was all while he was a member of Congress. Now, it's important to point out, Christina, that Gaetz has repeatedly and continues to deny any allegations that he had sex with anyone who was underage. He has admitted to womanizing, as he's described it. He's admitted to smoking and drinking to excess during this period of his life. But this morning on his own X account, he is rebutting these claims specifically about paying for sex, pointing to a transcript of a prior civil matter where what he claims to be one of the witnesses that also testified before the House Ethics Committee repeatedly was asked whether or not she felt she was being paid for sex and said that she did not think that was the case. Regardless, the committee believes that it is enough to prove that. Now, the other kind of important part of this aspect is why the committee decided to release the report. There was obviously a back and forth over that. They deliberated it for some time. There was a breakdown along party lines. Even the Speaker of the House weighed in and believed that it was not appropriate for the committee to release their report. They go into great detail to explain why they believe that the public deserved to see this information, that it was something that had been out there in the public sphere for quite a while, and there needed to be kind of a fine point put on it, and also the possibility that Gaetz could be a public figure in the future. Now, this was not a unanimous decision. In fact, there was a dissenting opinion offered by the chairman of the committee, Michael Guest, who said that he believed that it would set a bad precedent to release this report, especially given the fact that they have no jurisdiction over Gaetz anymore. They cannot offer any penalties based on the information that they found, and therefore there was no utility in releasing that report. So regardless, though, even though Guest said that he did not think the report should come out, it was a bipartisan decision to release this report because the committee is made up of equal parts Republicans and Democrats, and it would take at least one Republican to vote with Democrats to release the report. So, Christina, there is a lot in this report. It's 37 pages of content with a lot of evidence and supporting documents to go along with it. And there's no doubt that Matt Gaetz did not want it to see the light of day, which is one of the reasons that even at the 11th hour this morning, he was filing for a restraining order to prevent the committee from releasing it. But it is now out in the public, and the American people will now get to decide what they think of the work of the House Ethics Committee as it relates to Matt Gaetz. Christina.
Well, Ryan, thank you for that. Stand by just a second. I want to turn back to former Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy, who is a Democrat from Florida. I'm wondering what you make of all this and whether or not you think people in your home state would give Gaetz a second chance. You know, we've heard him say maybe he'll run for Senate. He's not acting like a man who thinks his political career is finished yet. What is your take on all this, especially given in light of what we're seeing and, as Ryan mentioned, these pages and pages of accusations in this report that's coming out today?
You know, actually, this comes right down to my hometown, because this investigation initiated because Joel Greenberg, who was the tax collector of Seminole County, a county that I represented when I served in Congress, was being investigated for a variety of other issues. He has been sentenced, and I think as a part of his cooperation with the law enforcement, these issues regarding Matt Gaetz came to light. And so there was subsequent investigation there. I think what's important is that now that the information has been made public, the onus is on the Florida officials as to whether or not they find enough evidence that they need to move forward. Because again, nobody is above the law. I think it's important for people who live in Florida, who are represented by him and who, want to have faith in the people that they elect and send to Congress, for them to see that no member of Congress is above the law. And I also think, it's important for the public to understand exactly the extent of his actions and to see him held accountable, and certainly to be able to include that in their calculus should he run for higher office in this state or federally.